Hello, everyone. This is Kevin Flowers, senior reporter with the Erie Times-News, and happy Tuesday. We're here today with Paul Vojtek from the Erie Water Works.
Hello, Kevin.
Hey, how you doing, Paul? And we're going to talk a little bit today about water rates and how you set those and how you come to those. And we're also going to talk, obviously, one of the things I've been writing about a lot over the last couple of weeks is this proposed lease prepayment deal with the city of Erie and kind of your perspective on how that came to fruition. I had the mayor here a week ago, and we talked a lot about that and how he wants to plug that deal into the budget. But let's start talking a little bit about that, because that's one of the things that I get a lot of questions about, a lot of emails about. How is this going to work? The city's going to get millions of dollars potentially. Talk a little bit about how this came to be, why the Waterworks would be interested in making a deal like that.
Well, Kevin, as you know, and most people there may or may not know that the Erie Water Works runs the water system for the city of Erie,
right.
And we operate under a lease agreement. That lease agreement currently goes through the year 2050, and part of this plan that we're working on with the city and the mayor will extend that lease to 2060, or 40 years from now. And that lease, the lease agreement, has set payments for each year. So each year we are scheduled to make a payment. In 2020, it'll be $3.8 million. Every fifth year it goes up an extra $200,000. It'll cap out, I think, at 5.2 by the year 2055 through 60.
Okay.
So what we've done, we've looked at it. It's a pretty simple mathematic calculation. You add up those future payments from 2020 through 2060, take the present value of those future payments, and you arrive at a figure, and then you discount that number by the interest rate of any bond that we would have to issue to get that payment.
Because you'll have to borrow money to make this payment.
We'll have to borrow the money. So for our customers, there's a absolutely zero impact on their water rates or water bills. All we're doing is converting what would have been lease payments that are part of our regular budget and converting those to debt service payments and affording us the ability to give the city a one-time lump sum payment. I like to compare it to somebody that wins the lottery. Nobody takes the annuity. Everybody wants that lump sum payment, and it really works out either way. It's the same to the lottery, whether you take the payments or whether you take the lump sum.
And you're comparing it to an annuity, because if you just continued to make those annual payments, that actually equates to more money than the lump sum,
yes,
because of interest and things like that.
The total of the payments through 2060 comes to about $185 million if you add up all those annual payments. Right. When you take the present value of that 185, discount it by the interest rate, whatever that will be when we hit the bond market, we're projecting about 3%, which is very conservative. It comes out to about a $90 million lump sum payment up front, $90 million bond issue.
The question a lot of people have is why is the Waterworks interested in doing this? Some people can get why the city is doing this because they are working towards a long-term plan to fix finances and they need the money, obviously. But why is the Waterworks interested in this?
We are an independent authority, but we were organized by the city of Erie. So we do like to work hand in hand with the city when we can. We believe that as the city thrives, then the whole region thrives. We service customers in 7 different communities, and we just felt if it was something, and it was paramount that it would be a zero impact on our customers, that we felt if we could help assist in the turnaround that the city's trying to make right now, and you do see signs of it. If we could be a part of that, we felt it was a good idea to help.
Your board, because you do have a board of directors, what's the conversation been like between you and the board about this particular proposal?
It was something that's been discussed for a number of years. It kind of came back up to the forefront, recently when Mayor Schember approached us. But the board is fully in favor of it. But like I said, the one condition was there had to be no impact to our customers.
Okay.
And they tasked me with figuring out a way that we could do that.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that, because you do have scheduled rate increases planned, but you're talking about this particular deal does not impact those.
Correct. The rates that that we had calculated for us, and like I said, we could talk about that a little bit more in detail. Did not consider any deal. As a matter of fact, they were compiled and presented before there was any talk about this prepayment. There's been no change to those rates. We had a hearing in October. We had a public hearing in November. The board is expected to approve them in December, and they were done totally independent of any deal that we're talking about prepaying the lease. Had there been an impact on rates, we probably wouldn't be doing it.
Is there anything do you plan to talk to City Council about this before their vote on the budget?
I think that we've discussed it with the administration, and we've kind of had preliminary discussions. I think in concept and in principle, as the mayor said last week, I think we have an agreement in principle. There's some of the finer details we have to work out, and we're going to be talking about that. I may address City Council, but I think the administration. I'll handle our board, and if the mayor and their finance director want to handle City Council, if there's a need for us to address council, I'd be more than happy to do it. But I'll leave that up to the mayor and the administration.
Okay, and let's talk a little bit about your rate study, your rate schedule that you have planned, and I know that this may get conflated with some people because some people might think, well, if they're going to do this deal, it's got to affect the rates. But talk a little bit. Let's pull back and talk about how often you go through rate studies, how you do them. You're in one right now, and those rates would, correct me if I'm wrong, would still have to be approved by your board. Take me through the genesis of this and the process.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we have a lease agreement with the city. Part of that lease requires the Erie Water Works to use a third-party rate expert to develop our water rates. We've been doing them every 5 years and looking at 5-year projected expenses and then 5-year based on usage characteristics and how people use water. Everybody knows people have been conserving more and more, so that was always a challenge.
Right.
But we match those two up, or at least the rate expert will match those up. Future expenses versus future revenues. And then they come up with what rates would be required based on the usage patterns of our customers to cover those costs.
Okay.
And it's a process called cost of service study, and it's exactly what it sounds like. We actually determine the cost to provide service to our customers.
And what are some of the components that go into that?
What would be our overall operating budget, capital costs. Of course, part of the operating budget is wages, salaries, benefits, regular operating costs, lease payment. We have Penvest loans we have out there that we're paying into. We have debt service for bonds, and then there's a component, Kevin, that we do direct investment into the system. So things that might not raise to the level of capital projects, but yet aren't operational. Things like vehicles, computers, things that have maybe a 5 to 6 year life. Right. We actually then have to. We have a certain amount of money that we invest directly versus borrowing and doing things. Now we've done a lot of borrowing in the past, and we have a significant amount of debt outstanding. And as we see it at the Waterworks, we're kind of migrating into a type of a maintenance mode, if you, for lack of a better term. We've rebuilt the system. We've invested over $300 million since 1992 when the authority took over the operations, and we're at a point now that we've rebuilt that system that was neglected for a long time, and now we're just making sure that we keep it in its tip-top shape. So those are the components that goes into what we have to pay for through our water rates.
Okay, you mentioned debt. How much debt are you carrying roughly on those improvements and other things?
We're roughly about $285 million right now.
Okay.
Yeah, we have about a 12, and it varies year to year, about $12 to $14 million a year.
And you structure that how in terms of debt service? What kind of annual payments do you make on that?
We right now we fluctuate between about $12 and $14 million a year in debt service payments. We also then, part of our rates has to produce coverage. We have to give our bondholders a 20% comfort level. So in addition to the 12 to 14 million, as you multiply that times 1.2 to give a comfort level to the bondholders, and that has to be covered in rates as well. And that's what produces that money to reinvest directly into the system.
Okay, all right. You talked a little bit about your agreement with the city requiring you to use an outside consultant to set rates. how do you choose? Who do you go with? How do you choose them? Talk a little bit about that.
And it's a professional services process, Kevin. And we this year, the first year we've used them, Riftalis Consultants out of North Carolina, nationally known. A few of the different organizations that I belong to, they're very active in them, and I've come to know a few of their folks. They were actually party to some of the things that we've done in the past when we purchased Mill Creek water system a few years back in 2015. They were involved in that. The previous rate consultant had retired, and so they came in fresh perspective. We weren't sure what we were going to see, but I think they did an extremely good study. Looked at all the different factors and different things that go into the rate making, and produced a very, I think, reasonable rate plan for the next 5 years.
Okay, and that rate plan basically says what in terms of percentage, those kind of things?
Yeah, for percentages, we're over the 5 years, just real quickly, it's 5% in 2020, 5% in 2021, 4% in 22, 5% in 23, and 4% in 24. And I think it's important, while those sound like big numbers, I think it's important that our average customer currently has a bill of about $96. With the increase, it'll be
is that residential customer?
Residential customer, yes. Our average residential customer, quarterly, that's quarterly, $96. The rate increase will take them right about to about $101 a quarter. You're talking about $20 a year increase on that in that first year,
right.
$20 per year for high quality water delivered to your home every day. We believe that's reasonable. I mean, nobody likes to pay more, and we understand that. And we tasked Riftalis and our rate consultant to make sure they factor everything in to make sure our rates are as reasonable as possible.
Do you have any information in terms of how that compares to what people pay in other regions or around here?
Yeah, Kevin. One of the things that we always look at is how do we compare? We looked at some of the Western Pennsylvania, because laws apply differently and age of the systems. We're all about the same. So we looked at Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we're almost about half. Their 2019 rate average customer is about $198 per quarter.
Okay.
Ours is 90, as I said, 96. So it's actually less. Our new rates are still going to be about half of Pittsburgh. We compared also to Westview, which is another suburb outside of Pittsburgh. We're about 25% cheaper than them. Their average bills in 2019 were about $125 per quarter for residential customers. And then we also looked at my former employer down in Greensburg, Westmoreland Water. We're about 50% cheaper than them, as well as Harrisburg. Then we looked at Harrisburg. We're about 50% of their rate. I'm sorry, they're about 50% higher. We're not 50%. Okay. They're 50% higher. So while our bills are about $100, their bills average $150, $153 a quarter.
Okay, so it sounds like from the numbers that you mentioned over the 5 years, we're talking about roughly what, like 23% over.
It'll be if you add them up, it's 23. And I'll just be full transparency with the. Interest on the increases on the increase comes out to about 25%.
Okay.
So our customers will go from $96 to about $121 by the year 2024. The average customer.
121. Okay, and that would be
about $25
into 2024.
Yeah, and that's about a $25 increase on roughly $100. So it comes out to about, because it's compounded a little bit over the 5 years. So it comes out to about a 25% increase.
Okay, so your board still has to approve this. The kind of reading the tea leaves, the conversations you've had, is the board comfortable with this rate structure then?
Yes, we presented to them in October. As I said, we then had a public hearing in November. Comments from the board, they were able to review the study. I've spoken with them. I don't have any reason to believe it wouldn't be approved, but again, I can't speak for the board. If something would come up between now and our December 19th board meeting, then we would have to address it.
Okay, and another question, and then we flip back to the prepayment deal. When you factor in debt service and a lot of these other things in terms of how your consultant sets rates, then explain to people why new debt, for lack of a better term, that would be involved in being able to pay for this prepayment won't factor into the rate structure.
Again, one of the things that they consider in the development of the rates is all our operating costs in addition to the lease payment.
Okay.
As I said, the lease payment was $3.8 million scheduled for 2020. we've actually put together a schedule that would pretty much mimic what those what the lease payments would have been with our new debt service.
Right. So just so we're clear, you're structuring for this prepayment deal, you're trying to structure the debt specifically related to that to mirror what you would have been paying the city every year
Exactly.
in terms of a lease.
That's exactly our goal, and I think we've come to a pretty good conclusion with that, where it is almost a perfect mirroring of the scheduled lease payments that we would have made in lieu of the debt service payments.
Okay. Are there any capital improvements, big ones that are coming down the line for the waterworks that you're going to need that might factor into any of this?
Well, yeah, one of the, and it got a little bit of press in the Times, was our $32 million Penthouse loan. Mm-hmm. That was for four big projects. The biggest one being the Cherry Street pump station. Okay. Up there, by the golf course.
And what's the scope of the work there?
Full renovation. It pumps water into 3 different pressure districts for us. So it's extremely vital to our operation from a water consistency, water availability. We're running. That's when I go to bed at night. That's the one that gives me heartburn because we're running out of replacement parts and things like that.
That's what I was going to ask. I mean, how easy is it to service a facility of that age and that complex?
It's very difficult, and I give kudos to our employees that work on those things in our maintenance department. That they keep that running. As I said, it goes into 3 different pressure districts. This project, it's estimated about $12 million to do a full renovation of that. All new electrical gear, all new pumps, security. We're actually adding a separate building to take full advantage of our storage tanks that we have up there. The current pumps don't go all the way to the bottom, to the floor of the reservoirs, so we kind of lose a little bit of storage because we can't access that because of the pumping. So it's a full renovation of that, and it's going to be a tremendous project for the waterworks and for our long-term future.
In terms of timetable on completing something like that, how long would that work take?
That you're probably talking 18 to 24 months. It's going to be a long-term project. We're probably going to be going out to bid shortly, with hopefully maybe doing some groundwork in this year, but probably not really getting into full speed until next construction season. April, May timeframe.
Okay. And when you talk about all these projects, you talk about prepaying on your lease, these kind of things, and we're going back to debt, Paul. Does that concern you in terms of just the overall amount of debt service that you're carrying? I get a lot of questions about that from people. Well, how much debt can they carry? That's going to have an effect at some point. Yeah. Explain, and I know we talked about some of this, but explain how you structure debt payments every year to kind of to handle that financial responsibility. Yeah.
Well, of course, if there's one alternative, when we inherited the system back in 1992, it was in pretty dire shape. Mm-hmm. If anybody remembers the old Chestnut pumping station, and then when I interviewed here in 1998, that building was boarded up. There wasn't a window in that place. It wasn't operational. I guess it was functional, but it wasn't. They wouldn't take me over there for my interviews. They said, you don't want to go over there. So they
didn't want to show you the infrastructure.
Exactly. So we had 2 options. Either raise rates tremendously or borrow the money and do things kind of in a strategic way where the debt service is aligned to the life of the asset. Meaning, if you borrow a 30-year bond for a pump station, you're going to get 30 years out of that pump station. So the people that use that pump station are going to be paying for it over those 30 years instead of hitting everybody with a big rate increase and try to do it today. And who knows if people are here using it 20 years from now or not. Right. That was the strategy. We prioritized some of these things we did, and we moved forward. Now, we do carry a lot of debt. It's something that was necessary to rebuild the system. And I'll just look at the rating agencies, the companies that actually look at organizations and give you a credit rating. We've increased our credit rating three slots from when we started in 1992. We currently carry an A. And in our economic environment here in Erie, and with the different things that we have to deal with, that's a very strong rating. So while on the surface it may look like a lot of debt, I think that what I would consider experts in analyzing that have given us 2 thumbs up and said that it's reasonable. Our rates still are reasonable when you look at other things. That's how we pay our debt. Right. That's through the water rates. So I think that while nobody likes to have huge amounts of debt, it's a necessity to do what we needed to do. And as I said, if we get into the maintenance mode, we may see that debt then starting to dwindle down a little bit over the next, 10, 15, 20 years.
And the way that's structured, the amount that would be earmarked for the prepayment, I'll say it in that way, would be factored into all of that overall debt then?
Yeah, it'll be part of our overall debt, but what we'll do is instead of money being earmarked for the lease payment,
right,
we'll just add a little bit more to our debt repayment, and that's kind of what we're gonna do, and that's why there's a neutral impact, neutral to all our customers. And like I said, that was a major condition before we would proceed with this. Was we had to demonstrate to our board, which we've done, that there would be no impact to our water rates.
Okay. What do you see as some of the, and maybe they're not capital improvement projects now, or maybe just the future of the water system in terms of, you prepay, you're going to have control of the system for a while. So what are some of the things that customers should look for in terms of the evolution of the system, even the city's relationship with you moving forward?
Yeah, well, I think back in 2015 we picked up the Mill Creek system. We
right,
purchased it from Mill Creek. I think that as regulations continue to evolve, some of the small utilities around our area up here may look to Erie Water Works to maybe regionalize. I think establishing this 40-year arrangement with the city, I think that opens up maybe a level of confidence that some of the outlying communities may want to consider joining the Erie Water Works system. Right. Some of the areas to our west have water problems, from a lot of the farming areas with wells and that. I think that the evolution of the Erie Water Works could just become more regional, I think. We have excess capacity. We have state-of-the-art water treatment process. We have all this. Cherry Street Pump Station is going to be able to make sure all our different areas have a reliable, source of water.
And I was going to ask you, do you keep that extra? Is that extra capacity on purpose? Is that extra capacity, in case we get a microchip company who wants to come to Erie and we know that we have enough water to service them? Is that the case?
Yeah. Well, the excess capacity we've inherited it back in the day. We have two treatment plants, Chestnut Street and the Richard S. Wazaleski plant in Mill Creek down below Tracy School. The capacity to those back in the 60s and 70s and even early 80s, they ran both plants at full bore to meet the needs.
Right.
That was
because there were a lot of industries,
no meters. People
correct,
didn't have meters.
Correct.
I always said people used
to. That was another point.
Yeah, they used to water their sidewalks. But so as meters were installed, loss of industry, and also conservation has improved, we pretty much end up with excess capacity. We're pumping about 24 million gallons of water a day today. And I talked to my predecessor, Mr. Wazaleski, and he'd say that there were times they were pumping 65, 70 million gallons in a day.
And what kind of the permits that you have allow for how much?
The permits that we have right now is 45 million down at the Wazaleski and 32 at the Chestnut.
Okay.
It comes out to about 77 million. We have a withdrawal permit from the lake of, I believe, only about 66 million. So that's we can only take that much at any one time. But as I said, we're only pumping about 24. Our system only demands are about 24.
So is that an area for growth where, let me put it this way, is that with that kind of capacity, is that something we could market in the future to communities that need water badly, truck it out of Erie and try to make some money and improve the area that way?
Absolutely, that's a great idea as long as we're within the Great Lakes Basin. One of the things that we deal with here in Erie and any other utility around the Great Lakes is an international accord that does not allow water to be taken out of the Great Lakes.
So it's not like you can truck water to Vegas.
No,
you're somewhere to
can't
make
do
money.
that. You can't do that.
And that's a question that people will periodically have, and I'm sure you've probably heard that before too. Well, why can't we make money? There's so many communities all over the nation that need water. Why can't we just truck our water there?
If you think about, we go we could go state line to state lines. We're kind of in a unique position right between New York and Ohio. So to the north, we can't go any further than the lake, right? But to the south, if you just the rule of thumb that I always say is if you take 79 and if you go west of 79, you can go almost down to Conneautville, which is pretty far. East of 79, give or take, Town Hall Road in Summit Township is where the land actually starts turning down and start going to the Ohio River Basin.
Right.
And you can't pipe water outside of those lines. To the west, there's not a whole lot of development down there, and to the east, you're half of Summit Township is in, half Summit Township's out. So if you look at their system, they run wells for part of their system because they can't take our water into certain areas of their water system. So.
Okay. All right, Paul. Last thing I want to ask you about, the city, as part of their whole conversation about improving their finances, has talked a little bit about doing an appraisal on their system. Where do you fall on that?
I think right now the deal that we're doing, it doesn't really rely on the value of the system.
Okay.
I think just due diligence, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea for the city to do that. But the deal we're talking about now, it's a finite number. There's lease payments are already scheduled, and it's a mathematical equation. It's a simple, factoring in the present value, as I said.
Okay.
So to do that before this deal, it's not necessary if we proceed with this deal. But if at some point they want to do it and look at other, potential other options, that's their prerogative.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, Paul. Thank you for being with us and answering a lot of questions. And I know a lot of the audience that we have and the consumers of our news had about the system and this deal. So,
well, Kevin, it's always a pleasure.
We'll talk soon because there'll be a lot of other stories on this. So.
I'm sure.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.